Shalom and welcome to this home edition of the Middle East Report. And in this program today, we'll be discussing the need to stand up for Israel in the Republic of Ireland as two brave and courageous women stand up for the truth of the God of Israel and the nation of Israel. Well, welcome to the program, and have two very special guests on this home edition of the Middle East Report. They're all the way from the Republic of Ireland. I'm joined by Jackie Goodall, who is the director of Ireland-Israel Alliance, and also Audrey Griffin, who is an author. I'll start off with you, Audrey, because I got sent in the post your book. Here it is. It's called Hey Ireland, Israel's on the Line. Are we prepared for a potential Holocaust? And this is thanks to a lovely viewer, and I'm going to read this, called Anna G. And she writes, Dear Simon, I'm sending you this book to you so that you know that our Lord has Ireland in his sights with regard to Israel. I hope you enjoy it and know there is hope for our nation. We just need to get the book into the hands of the Irish people and anyone else living here. Thank you for your many programs dealing with Israel. Much appreciated. Shalom. And so this is the power of one of viewers sending a book in that you are now on the Middle East Report. So, Audrey, I'll start off with you because Jackie was on the Middle East Report last year in our studios in London. Can you share with us how you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and how he's given you a love and a passion for Israel and the Jewish people?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I grew up a Catholic in Ireland and still living in Ireland here. And at the age of 13, I remember I was very moved by a program, just an ad on the television, actually. I think it was a Trócaire or Concern ad, one of these aid organizations. And I was seeing emaciated children in Africa, and it really affected me. And I remember going to my room and crying and saying, oh Lord, send me and send me now. And I don't want to wait till I'm grown up. And I was 13. And I'll even be a nun, I said. So, well, thankfully, I didn't go fully down that route, but I did get born again at the age of 18. I had an amazing experience. I'd been away working down in the west of Ireland in an Irish community. And when I returned, there was nobody at home. So mum and dad and the other children were gone away. And all of it, well, I can't say all of a sudden, but during that week, the sense of the presence of God in the house grew and expanded and was just so tangible that I knew that I had to go to my dad's church by the end of the week. So my dad at this stage was born again, and I just knew I was compelled to go and check out this church. And so, I only had £5 at the time, and there were no bus services on a Sunday morning, but I managed to get a taxi some of the way there, and I got to that service and praise God, dedicated my life to the Lord. And the wonderful thing is, so that was when I was 18, but it was only within a few years that the Lord really put missions on my heart again. So that desire he'd placed there, that seed that he'd sown when I was 13, that came to fruition then in that he began to send me out into a few nations. The first of which was Lebanon, actually, and that was in 2003. And I was, the Lord sent me to a home for children, what we used to call an orphanage. And I was there for 3 months, and I grew to love the Arabs and the Muslims. I actually expected that the Lord would send me to the Middle East and use me as a missionary in the Middle East, in somewhere like Iraq or Afghanistan, or, I didn't envisage that 2 years later, he'd lay it on my heart to go to Israel. And so it was in 2005 that I went to Israel for the first time, and the Lord showed me to go to Israel College of the Bible, so a Bible college based in Jerusalem. And I was blessed there. I absolutely loved living in Israel as well. I love the Middle Eastern culture, that you can, experience in both places actually, and in Jordan and beyond. But yes, I loved the experience, and I found it to be really an eye-opener. Up to that point, I was quite ignorant with regards to Israel. I had never, I'd never had any issues with the Jewish people. I was never anti-Semitic or anything, and I loved the Old Testament as I loved the New Testament. But it was then when I was in Israel that something began to really develop in my heart. And basically what happened was I was there in the land 8 months. I was always in and out of the dorms of the college, in the center of the modern city, walking the streets, going down to the Jewish market, down to a 24/7 prayer center, down to a soup kitchen that was down in the old city. I just absolutely loved this. I was there for 10 months that first year. And I never once witnessed, I must say, one little ounce of discrimination or apartheid. Not once, not once. Anyway, I was 8 months there in the land, and the Dean of Students asked me, so Audrey, are you like all the other students? They were international, Jewish and Arab students in the college, but are you like all the other international students? You just want to stay in Israel for the rest of your life, get married here, And I was like, oh no, I just have a heart for missions. I don't mind where the Lord sends me. It's fine, I loved being there, but I wasn't biased in that regard, but it prompted a question in my heart. I really felt, am I missing something? Yes, I love the people. I just think this is wonderful. I love seeing the Arabs and Jewish people interact freely and do their business freely on a daily basis, and just life in Israel. But is there more to this that I'm not seeing? And so I asked the Lord. I only knew the people in the college a few months. I was only getting to know people, 8 months at that stage. But I'd known the Lord a number of years, and so I felt the safest person to ask was the Lord. And so what I said was, Lord, a very simple prayer. Would you give me your heart for the people and the land of Israel? And a miracle happened. Within 2 weeks, I was walking down the Jaffa Road that connects the modern city of Jerusalem to the old city. For the umpteenth time, I was always out and about. And I was walking against the flow, let's say. So coming up from the Western Wall were Jewish people. Now, they all happened to be Orthodox religious Jews, dressed in black, pale skinned, daddy with the hat on, and, mom with the pram, and all the children. And they were coming in droves towards me, away from the wall, back up to where they lived in Mea Shearim and wherever. And all of a sudden I looked at them and I realized that something had happened in my heart. My eyes began to well up and I realized, oh Lord, I love them. I love them. I love your people. And I was just emotional walking all the way down to the Western Wall. It's the only time it ever happened. I'd often been there before, and I'd often, so many times, hundreds of times before that, come against these crowds. And for anybody who's never been to Israel and doesn't know the difference between secular Jews, those who aren't religious, and the religious types, the religious Jews, and I mean this very respectfully, but it's important to them that they don't mix with international people. And so they weren't I never found them to be too friendly, although I'm sure they're absolutely wonderful people in their own community and but I never found them very friendly. And the secular people you could chat away with, in a place that's like Grafton Street, kind of the center, the hub of the where the young people would hang out in Jerusalem. But to think that these people all of a sudden were cute, that's all I could, that was how I described them. I was like, Lord, they're so cute. Oh, they're so cute, but they're not cute. So it didn't make sense in the natural. And that's how I knew that something supernatural had taken place. So that's my story. That's how it started with Israel. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous, Audrey. That's an incredible testimony, and thank you so much for sharing that. And Jackie, warm welcome to the program. I'm very fond of what you do. I think you're like a warrioress in the Republic of Ireland, standing up for Israel and the Jewish people against what seems to be a tidal wave of Jew hatred and hatred towards Israel, sadly, in the Republic of Ireland. But can you just give us an update on some of the work and the activities that you've been doing through Ireland-Israel Alliance?
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for inviting me back, Simon. It's been just over a little bit over a year actually, since I was on the program last. But yeah, I mean, we've had a busy year. Probably the first main thing that springs to mind was on the 13th of May, 2021, the Ireland-Israel Alliance was invited to address the Joint Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defence with regard to these demolitions of, which are actually illegally built structures in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. These structures are built in area C. One of the particular villages was the village of Kirbet Humsa. I don't know if you remember it, but there was a lot of talk about it just before the Gaza conflict broke out, and just before the whole thing about Sheikh Jarrah, the neighborhood in eastern Jerusalem. But basically, these structures are built on land that Israel administers, and certainly in the case of Kibbutz Humsa, the so-called village, and I'll say a so-called village because it's, I mean, there were structures built on a firing range, basically, and Israel demolished them. Anyway, there was a big hoo-ha about it, and there was a debate in the joint from the Joint Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defence, and they asked us to act as a witness. So Audrey actually came on to that meeting with us. We were invited to invite other witnesses along, so we invited the International Legal Forum, which is actually based in Israel. We had representatives from UK Lawyers for Israel. Alan Shatter came on, and we basically put forward our side of the story, that Irish Aid, which is the Irish government's overseas aid agency, should not be funding illegal structures on land that Israel administers, certainly not on a firing range. So we did that. That was the first, I suppose, major thing that comes to mind that we did in 2021. We came up obviously against a slew of hostile NGOs, including B'Tselem, Tzedakah, Al-Haq, etc., and we were very much outnumbered. Then on the 25th of May, I mean, a really truly shocking orgy of condemnation was directed against the state of Israel from Dáil Éireann, and I can think of no other way to describe really what happened. I thought I've seen it all, you know, with regard to the demonization of Israel from within Ireland, but that was truly shocking. The language used was absolutely appalling, and these were from our elected representatives. I'm sorry to say that TD after TD, deputy after deputy, stood up and literally demonized Israel. Now, some of the language from certain TDs was worse than others, but overall, it really was truly shocking. And it all had to do with a motion that was intended to lay a foundation for state-sponsored boycott, divestment and sanctions, BDS legislation, which labelled Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley as de facto annexation and the singular obstacle to a two-state solution. That particular motion, it was proposed by Sinn Féin and was supported by what I call the usual suspects, Trócaire, Sadaka, Christian Aid, and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. On that horrible night, the Irish government's only concession to Israel was to defeat a motion calling to expel Israel's ambassador to Ireland and all Israeli diplomatic staff. So I wrote about that particular night in David Collier's report, Anti-Semitism in Ireland, which we were very much, the Ireland-Israel Alliance was very much involved with that from the start. So that was probably really the worst of it, but it was shocking. And I have to say, I was very glad that David Collier was compiling his report while that was going on, because I think if nothing had been said about that particular debate, and it's online if anybody wishes to go and see some of the language that was used, a Dáil Éireann debate, Tuesday, the 25th of May, 2021. So yeah, I mean, that's some of the stuff that we've been doing. On a more positive note, because there's always positives to these things. We did our first in-person event on the 18th of November in Dublin, and we welcomed Israel's new ambassador to Ireland, Lironi Bar Sada, and she was interviewed by Maurice Cohen, the chair of the Jewish Representative Council of Ireland, and we also had Alan Shatter and Natasha Hausdorff. She is a barrister. Many of you viewers might not know her, but she is a barrister. She's an expert in international law, and she is legal director of UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust. And Audrey also spoke at that event, and she introduced her book and also sang Jerusalem of Gold as well. So that was a wonderful evening, and as I say, it was our first in-person event because of COVID. And I'm just very, very pleased that we were able to do it, because I think had the event been about a week later, we possibly wouldn't have been able to do it because of the restrictions that have come back in. So yeah, a mixture of positive and obviously the negative, yeah, so we keep going in what is a very hostile environment, but thankfully, you know, there are people like Audrey, there are other Christians in Ireland who are praying on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, specifically for Israel and for the Jewish people also here living in Ireland. So I'm very, very grateful for that, and I'm also very grateful for the support we have from the Jewish community here in Ireland as well, and of course from the embassy and the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, the Irish branch. So we have a lot of support. It does appear many times that we're outnumbered, and we are. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Certainly in the natural. But I know that God is working in this nation in a very deep way. It's not always visible to the naked eye, of course, what he's doing, but certainly the Lord is doing a work in this nation. So we continue to act and to pray, because that was one of the things that the Lord spoke to me right at the very beginning when I set up the organization, was that it was necessary to both act and to pray.
Jackie, thank you so much for giving us an update there. I think what reminds me is that with the Lord, you don't need large numbers. Just look at the story of Gideon. With his small army was whittled down to a few. So we know that with God, the impossible is actually possible. Audrey, You wrote this book, as I quoted earlier, and also Jackie quoted as well. Hey, Ireland, Israel is on the line here. You also say, are we prepared for potential Holocaust? Now, I just want to read one of the recommendations here from Mike Kerry, who's a journalist and author, at the back of your book. And he says, her book is sometimes challenging, sometimes controversial, scholarly, spiritual, yet accessible. If Ireland is the most hostile country in Europe towards Israel, then we need to hear what Audrey Griffin has to say. Have we failed our elder brothers in the faith? Hopefully not. Israel is on the line. Ireland take that call. So can you explain how God placed it on your heart to write this book? And it's a very much of a prophetic book, warning of the dangers, the direction that the Republic of Ireland going in politically, but also spiritually, against the God of Israel and against the nation of Israel and the Jewish people.
Sure. It was back in 2011 that I was over in Siberia, actually, with Operation Exodus. And was having a wonderful time on mission over there. And my heart was still very much for missions in the nations. I had no clue that the Lord would want to bring me back to Ireland and to settle me here. But that's what he spoke to me one day while I was there. So that was about 2 weeks into my 3-month time in Siberia. And he made it very clear to me. He showed me the map of Ireland one day, just in a prayer time. And it was so clear to me that he wanted me to have a heart for Ireland. And I'd never not had. I mean, I do love my country, and I'm actually an Irish teacher. I love the language. I love, singing some Irish songs even, and doing a bit of dancing and that. But I'd never had a heart for Ireland as a Christian. My heart was out there in the nations. And now God was changing that. Now God was changing my focus toward Ireland. And it was within another few weeks after that, while still on that same trip, that I was again having a prayer time in the apartment one morning. And the Lord made it very clear to me to write a book for the people of Ireland titled, Hey Ireland, Israel's on the Line. He actually, impressed that on my heart, the title of the book. And so that was really how it came about. This was a call from the Lord to get a message out there into the nation. And I knew that, books have been written about Israel, but this was specifically directed toward the people of Ireland, because of some of the reasons maybe that have already been brought up, the hostility, unfortunately, in this nation toward Israel. And I also kind of began to think that, the Lord could have chosen somebody with a different personality to mine to write the book, but I kind of, wanted to bring some lightheartedness into it. So, there were times in the book when there's a little bit of humor, and there's, I tried, and I believe it's not a heavy read, even though some of it is very serious stuff. But that's actually how I got inspired to write. And, I was asked there recently, what's my, what are my favorite bits in the book? And I would say that some of my favorite bits, here's one of them. And we know this, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the theologian and pastor, the German theologian, who was assassinated by the Nazis during World War II, said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And so I knew this was a serious undertaking, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I feel it's been a privilege and an honor to do it, to be honest. And it's wonderful to bless Israel, because we're told to bless Israel in the scriptures. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 says that God will bless those who bless Israel. So, yeah.
Amen to that as well. And being a broadcast journalist, you can actually see the Genesis 12 verses 1 to 3 actually come alive in our news events, and actually shapes the world around us. Either a nation is blessed or it's cursed. But Jackie, can you give a kind of a cultural and political understanding of where Ireland is today? Because it was only a couple of decades ago that Ireland was considered one of the most conservative Catholic nations in the entire Western world. And it seems like it's gone through a massive cultural revolution from being a staunch conservative Catholic country to being one of the most liberal, progressive countries in the Western world.
Yeah, it's quite a change. It's quite a change. I mean, I actually left Ireland in 1984 and I moved back in 2007. I thought I was coming back to the Catholic Ireland that I had left behind. I mean, not that I was, you know, I was never really a practicing Catholic. I mean, although I was brought up a Catholic, I never really got into the whole kind of Catholic religious thing. But even since 2007, Ireland has changed quite dramatically. I think Ireland is a very progressive nation and is very proud to be so, and especially with regards to anti-Israel legislation. Those who wish to demonize Israel and to put forward anti-Israel legislation through the government are very proud of the fact that Ireland might be the very first country in Europe to enact, for example, the Occupied Territories Bill, which seeks to criminalize Irish citizens from trading with Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and parts of East Jerusalem, with fines of up to €250,000 and or a 5-year prison term. So that'll give you some indication of what it's like here. Ireland, it would be proud to be the first European country to do such a thing. Also, with regard to that debate that took place on the 25th of May in the Dáil, Sinn Féin was saying that, oh, we are now the first country in Europe to label the settlements as de facto annexation. So Ireland wants to be, you know, out there, you know, to be seen as completely, totally progressive, anti-Israel legislation. Look at us, plucky little Ireland. We were the underdog for so long, not going to be so anymore. This is what I'm getting, you know. So we've lost our moral compass. I mean, I have absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. We have completely lost our moral compass. Now, I'm not saying that everything was great, you know, during, you know, the years when the Catholic Church dominated this country. I grew up as a Catholic. I went to a convent school. I made my first communion, all that sort of stuff. I know some terrible things went on, but, you know, terrible things go on everywhere. You know, it's not to say that, you know, we should, it's like we've literally thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and we've just gone totally 100%. I wouldn't even call it, I mean, it's not even liberal. It's just, it's this progressivism, which is highly damaging. And it's leading to a very dark place. So I kind of despair sometimes, but it's a tide that's very difficult to hold back. So yeah, with regard to the Occupied Territories Bill, I mean, it still hasn't been passed, but that is something that its proponents are saying about it. Yeah, let's be the first country in Europe to do it. You know, everybody else will follow suit, and they'll all think we're great. You know, also we now have a rotating seat on the UN Security Council. Rotating seat for 2 years, and many of Israel's enemies from within the government are saying, let's use this opportunity to advance further legislation that will sanction Israel. So we're trying to use every opportunity we can, and so far we haven't actually been successful, but the drive is there, the push is there.
Jackie, what we just shared there is quite frankly, absolutely shocking and shameful as well. And Audrey, don't your Irish politicians realise the dangerous game they're playing in all this? And not only are they actually bringing a curse upon themselves, as we mentioned earlier with Genesis 12, chapters 1-3, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. There is a curse involved in this when a nation takes an active or a hostile stand towards Israel. But also with this as well, particularly with the Occupied Territories Bill, we're seeing that this actually sows the seeds for Ireland's economic destruction. Because Ireland is known for being a tax haven for these massive, big American internet corporations, Microsoft, Facebook, the likes, that like to base themselves in Ireland because of the low business tax they pay. But yet, if those corporations have to choose between disinvesting from Israel and disinvesting in the Republic of Ireland, they are not going to disinvest from Israel because they know that their future is tied up with Israel, that Israel is the startup nation, that all this new technology that is driving the world in the 21st century is actually coming from the Jewish state. Therefore, do they fully realize not only the spiritual complications, but the political implications as well as the economic implications of pursuing such a disastrous and, quite frankly, evil foreign policy towards Israel?
I don't really think they have a clue. And I think, yes, it's down to a spiritual blindness. And also just a failure to see as well that Israel has blessed the nations so much. If only our politicians would look back at what some of our former politicians did in the past and said in the past and how they acted on behalf of Israel. And, I'm thinking of Daniel O'Connell, who was a politician and a solicitor, and he stood in Westminster and he repealed a law that had come in, a Jewish law. It was called the De Judaismo, and it was about a dress law in Britain that was brought in, and he had it repealed. This is our Daniel O'Connell of Ireland. We've got O'Connell Street there in the centre of Ireland. I'm thinking of the 18th century politician as well, Edmund Burke. Now, most people don't associate this quotation with him, but it actually was his. He was an Irish 18th century politician, Edmund Burke, who said, "All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing." And I think our politicians really need to do a little bit of looking back into our history. And it's not all good as well. We've let the Jewish people down during the 1930s, 1936, the 1940s, when we were refusing to allow Jewish orphans into Ireland. 100 Jewish orphans. So basically a Jewish society had paid for I can't remember if it was a large house, but in Delvin, County Westmeath, to house 100 Jewish orphans from the age of 7 to 19 or thereabouts. And Minister Boland at the time refused. Now, it took a little bit of intervention from the then president of Israel, Yitzhak Herzog, to intervene and to bring a change about. But they were only allowed in for a year, and then they had to be sent out again, these 100 Jewish orphans from World War II after the Holocaust. So look, we've got some good history when it comes to Israel. We've got some bad history. But if we look back to some of those wonderful politicians that did actually stand up, we would really learn a lot if our politicians would be willing to read the book and they could see this for themselves. They could learn some of these things. I was speaking to a politician very recently, and he was shocked to hear about some of those things I was sharing about the 1930s in Ireland, when, also we were refusing to allow Jewish refugees into the nation. So this was 1936, when it was already known worldwide that Austria, 120,000 Jewish refugees had been expelled from Austria. And it's incredible, but we said that we would only allow into Ireland people of German or Austrian passports who were not Jewish. Can you believe? So look, we've got a lot to learn from our history, and I think that would help us out, as well as looking at the Bible. And then looking at all of the blessings that we see today that Israel, I mean, my goodness, Google and all of our phones, computers, there's so many different blessings that have come, in the medical world. So if we were willing to actually look at those facts, as you say, I think, our politicians and the people of Ireland would be a lot better off.
And Jackie, what are your concerns? From what I've read and from speaking to Irish people, that there is a real fear that Sinn Féin will form the next government, and it really seems like it's Sinn Féin that is pushing this anti-Israel agenda, pushing this anti-Israel legislation. Is this linked to the IRA's links to the PLO going back to the 1960s and these kind of revolutionary Marxist movements that we saw that were against Israel through acts of terrorism throughout the 60s and the 70s? Is this where we see this strong bond between the IRA, Sinn Féin, the PLO, and the goals and objectives of the Palestinian Authority that are Fatah and the PLO that effectively don't want peace with Israel? They only want a one-state solution, and that is a Palestinian state with the destruction of the Jewish people, which is effectively calling for genocide. Because at pro-Palestinian rallies, we always hear the chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which is incitement to genocide.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It certainly does appear that way. We had a change of government in February 2020, and I was very worried actually at the gains that Sinn Féin made, and it was at that point that I actually spoke initially with David Collier about possibly doing a report looking into anti-Semitism, because I kind of knew what was coming. Whether Sinn Féin actually gets in or not is a matter of conjecture. There are two very opposing kind of thoughts on this, that there's no way that they will actually get in and form a government or be part of a power sharing government, because people will wake up in time and realize what they're really like. And these are not just people who are concerned about Israel, but concerned about freedom generally. So it is quite worrying that they have achieved so much. But it's a matter of conjecture really as to whether they actually get into power or not. A lot of Israel's enemies, they try to make out that they're pro-Palestinian, okay. But I don't actually believe that they are pro-Palestinian. I believe that they're simply both anti-Israel and anti-Palestinian, because they're actually more interested in their persistent efforts to demonize, delegitimize, and socially isolate the state of Israel than they are in trying to improve the lives of ordinary Palestinians. It's just demonization, 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 accusation, accusation. The accusation of apartheid is used with the sole intention of delegitimizing the state of Israel, the sole intention. There's nothing, absolutely nothing apartheid about Israel at all. But you could be blue in the face talking to people about this, but that is what the accusation is used for. And sadly, because Sinn Féin has made such gains, and they brought this motion on the 25th of May. A lot of the other politicians who were, sitting on the fence maybe, or, they were quite friendly. I know one particular politician completely turned about face during that particular debate. I wouldn't even call it a debate, actually. It wasn't a debate. It was just a litany of falsehoods and demonization. But I think they're doing it because they feel that, well, they're not really committed to Israel. They don't really get it deep down, you know. They know that Israel does a lot of good, but they feel that they're just up against a tidal wave of demonization. So they either join them or they're going to damage their political careers. And it's bullying and intimidation. Okay, that's what this is. And I know how that bullying and intimidation works because of my time when I was working with the Literary Festival, and we invited an Israeli writer over, and they were bullied and intimidated by the BDS crowd into not accepting the sponsorship from the Israeli embassy. So it's bullying and intimidation. And sadly, many of the politicians who would have stood up for Israel and who we could have relied on to maybe ask a prime minister's question, as it were, we can't rely on them anymore because they just think it's just not worth it, for them. They're more worried about their political careers than they are in standing up for the tiny state of Israel, not actually recognizing, what is really happening. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where we are with Sinn Féin. I mean, some people say, why don't you approach them, and why don't you try and get meetings with them? I know that some people have tried to, but I also know that whatever they might say about the Jewish people, and nobody likes to be accused of being anti-Semitic, of course, so they've no problem with the Jewish people, but it's with the Jewish collective, the state of Israel. And as far as I firmly believe that anti-Zionism is just the new innocent sounding incarnation of Jew hatred. So that's where we are. I know that Sinn Féin, they support the BDS movement. BDS, for those who don't know, it means boycott, divestment and sanction. It's a global economic warfare campaign. I mean, that is actually what it is. It's a warfare campaign whose ultimate declared goal is the destruction of the state of Israel. So, what I say, and I've been saying this all along, it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. It's perfectly legitimate to criticize Israeli government policy. We're constantly criticizing our own government. Israelis are constantly criticizing their own government. I mean, they had election after election within the space of 3 years there just a short while ago. So the Israelis spend an inordinate amount of time criticizing their own government policy. But what is anti-Semitic is to try and deny the right of the Jewish people to live collectively, securely, and at peace in their ancient homeland with the same rights as everybody else who lives in a democratic nation would expect. And that is actually the definition of Zionism. Zionism has become now a dirty word. And I noticed I sign up for the Dáil Éireann, it's like a Google kind of thing. So if there's any mention within Dáil Éireann, the Irish Parliament, of anything to do with Israel or Palestine, it comes up on my phone. So I'm checking to see what they're saying. And I've noticed now it's all about, attacking Zionists. Nobody mentions Jews. I think it's even a little bit kind of suspect now to mention even Israelis. So, it's Zionists. And what is Zionism? It's only the right of the Jewish people to live collectively and securely in their ancient homeland. That's all it is. But it's been turned into a dirty, nasty word. So that's where we are. It's complex. it comes at us from all different angles, so we continue on. We continue on fighting the good fight. So yeah.
Absolutely. And Audrey, you want to come in and just comment on that incredibly righteous defense of Israel. But before you say something, can I just bring something into the equation that I think a lot of your Irish politicians and journalists are actually missing? And this is the fact that when we talk about the apartheid that the Palestinians are facing, it's not in Israel. It's not in Judea or Samaria or so-called the West Bank or the Palestinian Authority, but this is in Lebanon, this is in Syria, this is in Jordan, and this is in Iraq, where the Palestinian people are being oppressed by their fellow Arabs. They're not able to enter professional jobs. They are considered third-class citizens, and even in Iraq, for example, they're facing being ethnically cleansed in Iraq. And then you combine that with the fact that Israel has now made peace with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Sudan, with Morocco. And the Arab world itself is realizing that Israel's not going away anytime soon. And we're seeing a kind of normalization of relations with Israel and the Arab states. So in a sense, how can Israel be anti-Arab when we're seeing these unprecedented historical relations between Israel and the Arab world taking place before our very eyes?
Yeah, there's a few things I'd like to pick up on there between what you've said and Jackie have said, actually. But, I'm thinking of the Syrian civil war and the lack of concern about Palestinians in the Yarmouk Palestinian camp in Syria. They were actually being treated very bad by the Assad regime, by but there was no outcry about this, just very interestingly. So there's a double standard, when it comes to Israel making any moves. And even, I'm thinking of Egypt, and, Egypt created a buffer zone. When Egypt closes the crossings into Palestine, into Gaza, there's no international outcry. When it created a buffer zone, that meant that quite a number of Palestinians were actually expelled from their homes by the Egyptian army. There was no international outcry, and yet Israel does anything, to try and protect and defend its people. But just a few other things there. I'm thinking of the whole anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism kind of argument. Is there, are they related or not? I think, personally, I would agree with Jackie that it's an absolute lie that anti-Zionism is unrelated to anti-Semitism, okay? Now, yes, people can, as she said, yes, they can, question what a government is doing and have issues and, dispute, but then there's a crossing of a line. And too often that's what's happening here. And I'm thinking of the late Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the Commonwealth, who explained this actually very, very well. He said anti-Semitism, is so socially unacceptable that it can only survive the way a virus survives, which is by mutating. In the Middle Ages, Jews were hated for their religion. In the 19th and 20th centuries, you weren't allowed to hate anyone for their religion because this is post-Enlightenment Europe. So they were hated for their race. Today, you can't hate anyone for their race, so you hate them for their nation state. And that is why anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. And again, those are the words of the late Lord Jonathan Sacks.
Excellent. We're down to the last 6.5 minutes of the program, and I kind of want to end on a good note, because I just want to support you both. I mean, you are both brave and courageous women. You're standing for the truth. You're standing for Israel and the Jewish people, and that you need all the support and the prayers of our viewers watching this home edition of the Middle East Report, because literally you both are on the front line and you're doing an amazing work, an amazing job standing up for Israel, standing up for the truth, and standing up for the God of Israel and Israel's Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. Jackie, we have a new president in Israel, in Isaac Herzog, and having done a program recently with Stephen Jaffe, the co-chair of Northern Ireland Friends of Israel, and unpacking his British and Irish connections, knowing that his grandfather was the chief rabbi of Ireland. Does this create an opportunity potentially for a new relationship between the Republic of Ireland and Israel through the historical relationship that the new Israeli president, Yitzhak Herzog, has with the Republic of Ireland?
Well, I would certainly hope so. I mean, Yitzhak Herzog, he actually came over to Ireland in 2018, and Simon Coveney welcomed him into the Department of Foreign Affairs, and there was a big event because it was the 100th anniversary of his of Chaim Herzog's death. Who was obviously, he went to school, he was born in Belfast, but went to school in Dublin. Whether that, I mean, I would like to think so, yes. I would certainly like to think that Irish connection will yield, you know, some developing good relations, and it will continue. I would also just like to say that I'm just kind of going on to David Collier's report, because I know that you interviewed him a short while ago, and his report was very important actually in a number of ways. I think in helping the situation. I think it highlighted to members of the government exactly what is going on, and I think more politicians are now starting to quietly come out and speak about their fears about the whole area of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and the demonization of Israel. They're coming out quietly and supporting us. So we do have friends in there, and a Friends of Israel parliamentary group is being set up. Now, it's taking an awful long time to set this up. I don't know why it's taken so long, but it could have something to do with, you know, the changes in the Israeli government, etc., over the last while. So I think there are a lot of avenues for the bettering of relationships. Isaac Herzog being one, and his ties with Ireland. And the fact that people are becoming more aware of the demonizing language that's been used within Dáil Éireann, and people are starting to come out and speak up about it, but quietly. And I'm just hoping that this Friends of Israel parliamentary group, which we really, really need, comes to fruition. I know that one or two people, they opted out of it after the last Gaza conflict, but certainly hoping that that's going to happen.
And Audrey, how can our viewers get hold of your book, Hey Ireland, Israel's on the Line? Because I think it's an essential read, and particularly for those Christians that are living in the Republic of Ireland, but also living in Northern Ireland as well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if they go to www.israelontheline.ie, that's my website. So www.israelontheline.ie. They'll find the bookshops where they'll be able to locate this book. But if they're living in Northern Ireland or other parts of the UK, you can buy the book from Amazon or from a great Christian bookstore called Teach Solas here in Ireland. It's a wonderful online Christian bookstore. And yes, if after reading it, you know, they could spread the news, get the message out there, you know, encourage other people to buy it. You know, this is not a business venture for me. It's more about getting a message out there. So, you know, if they could even approach their librarians, you know, their local library and say, look, would you consider taking this book? Some of them have actually agreed here already. And if maybe they would approach their local MPs or TDs, you know, after reading.
Absolutely. And Jackie, within 30 seconds, how can our viewers support you, Jackie, and also you, Audrey, in your brave and courageous defense of Israel and the Jewish people?
Okay, well, I would ask people to sign up, go onto the website. It's www.irelandisrael.ie. Sign up to receive our newsletters, sign up to become a member, and take part in our campaigns. We do numerous campaigns throughout the year. We write a mail shot to people kind of quite regularly, just telling them what's going on and what actions that we'd like them to take. So that would be really useful, and it will give me an idea and give us an idea of you know, how much support there is out there, because there is a lot of support, but it's quiet, but there is a lot of support. So I think that's probably the best way. Sign up to the website irelandisrael.ie, and you can find out all about us and what we're doing.
Fabulous. So Jackie and Audrey, thank you so much for joining me on this home edition of the Middle East Report from the Republic of Ireland. And thank you for being the bright lights in the Republic of Ireland. Thank you for shining God's truth and his love for Israel and the Jewish people, and also defending Israel, not only spiritually, but also politically as well, where it matters. And that's in Dublin, the heart of Irish politics. So I just want to thank you so much for being my special guest today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
And I just want to thank you all for watching this home edition of the Middle East Report. I think we can see from this program that there's a huge spiritual as well as a political battle going on in the Republic of Ireland for Israel and the Jewish people. And this is why Jackie and Audrey so much need our prayers and support this time. And also we need to support Irish Christians in their right to stand in defending Israel and the Jewish people. So thank you for watching this home edition of the Middle East Report.